I like it. I think it has a very strong identity in the early, mid, and late game, something the other matchups might not have. I also like it because I feel like I do understand it on some level. Bottom left for Super Team, it is Trigger.
And his opponent, the man with the name that can be not matched. It is Alpha X's Max Angel Astrea. I would take it even one step further and say that the relevancy for PvP, it starts in the first 5 seconds even. Like, if you see a chrono boost on the Nexus, that's a cannon rush. That's a cannon rush right there. Sometimes there is literally a decision point as you get into the game. Now, for many players, it's not really a decision point. You're either a cannon rusher or you're not. Speaking of which, Trigger with a cheeky little probe. That could not have been more perfectly timed. Oof. Thank you, Trigger, for doing that. He just represented a cannon rush right there with that little probe positioning, I think. I think he was trying to be like, hey, Astrea, you got to come over here and stop me from winning the game right now. And Astrea was on the other side of the map, and he's like, no, I don't.
I was going to say, there's a probe scout, so
yeah, so it doesn't do anything.
Where it could have to be. But it is Blackburn, and I would say that this map, any map that is very 100%, gateway expand, is not going to have any of those interesting points in the first 2 minutes, but right after, okay, 1.5 minutes, there you go. Then you get to see, does someone make a zealot? Does someone proxy a pylon? Does someone get a faster nexus? Does someone block the other nexus? And again, we are starting to already come out with hypotheticals where if it's a TVZ, it'd be like, so the Reaper's making. That's cool. I think that's really why PvP is the best. But this is a crusade I've been on for a while, I think, and people just don't care. So that's fair. Why is PvP the best? Well, there's a lot of reasons. I don't care. I did not care that much. Never mind.
They ask a question and
if you ever done that, you've done that though. Please tell me you've done that.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
And then I get the sir, this is a Wendy's.
Well, also the opposite. I would say that I've done both. Like, yeah, this is really interesting. Let me tell you a bunch of shit. And then I've also been the person that's like, oh yeah, tell me more about accounting. And they're like, actually, it's super interesting. Here's an hour's worth of information. I'm just like, no, I really wasn't that interested. I figured it was boring. My bad. But anyways, yeah. Perhaps you're a savvier social person than I am. This has gotten a little wacky.
It has. And I honestly don't like this move at all from Trigger. So he committed to the natural expansion. He's going to get one probe right here, but he committed his zealot across the map, which means he doesn't kill the pylon very quickly at all. He will have this Stargate out, which is, nice, but he's lost a whole lot of early game resources. And he didn't delay the warp gate or the additional gateway units here. The biggest thing you can say is he's going to have the shield battery relatively low on energy for when the Oracle pops in, but I don't know. I feel like this wasn't a very effective opening.
I don't think so. We're watching the Oracle swoop in right about now, though. So I don't know. It seems minor, but the shield battery being drained is a pretty big deal. Yeah, overcharge is going to have to be used to ensure this doesn't actually result in anything. So that's good on Astrea. It does seem like Astrea is... Ooh, even getting the Oracle. It does seem like Astrea is predicting these moves because he has full information. It really was a matter of organizing it in your brain. What was the biggest threat first? And then dealing with it as calmly as possible, which I guarantee a lot of other Protoss players would have made bigger mistakes. They would have overreacted to the Adept in the main or underreacted to it in the natural, whatever. And then they would have been prepared to shield battery overcharge. So they do it 2 seconds late. That's 5 more probes, whatever, right? And instead, it is 3 probes worth of damage, but Astrea having a much faster Nexus more than makes up for that. And he still stays ahead. So it's just really, I think, an order of operations thing. How in control of the game do you still feel, even when they have more tools to play around with?
That's a really, really good way of putting it, and a really good, framing of the situation. I think that highlights what the objective of Trigger was. But I gotta question the decision making from just a planning standpoint to do it against a player of Astrea's caliber. I love this as a concept against a lower level, and I actually love it as a concept against a lower level player going into a match against Astrea, because if you do something weird like this, then Astrea has to be on guard for it. But I think doing it specifically against one of the top 2 Protosses in North America is a little bit weird. Ooh, nice job right there. That was a really good eye, by the way, from Astrea. He noticed that the stasis ward was there, and he specifically put his probe in a position to not block the Nexus. Nice move.
Right. Nice move. It will go to third Nexus for both parties, but just touching on what you're bringing up, well, would Astrea have really faltered? It's not even the chance that Astrea can falter, because no pro gamer is inflappable. It's just more, I think, for Trigger, it's not like he is proxying a factory in a starport, and if it, doesn't work, it doesn't work, like earlier. He is still, I think there's something to be said about playing to the way that you usually would, because it is comfortable for you. You know what you need from it and what you can do with it. And even if it doesn't work, again, it's not like you proxied everything. So you're just like, oh, it didn't work. My bad. Yeah, like, JK. That was more of a, it didn't work. Oh, well, I'm still glad that I tried, I think, situation for Trigger, who does have his, little stylistic preferences when it comes to the Protoss race. And we have Astrea once again performing very well against stasis traps, but he really can't push the issue here.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was a low risk, low reward play, and even with it failing, honestly, pretty hard. Even he didn't lose the oracles, which is really, really important, but it didn't get what he wanted to done. He's still only down, 5-6 probes, and he's in a very, very playable position. And in fact, having this double oracle here, he still has a lot of potential. Ooh, looks like he just misses the move into the main base, and there, nice job. He does trigger that stasis ward of triggers. And always difficult to cast a trigger game, just like a time game.
Yeah, a little bit. Surprised he didn't take down the stasis trap. Oh, and the retreat! That is nicely done. Very coincidental. Trigger's oracles were just there. It's very possible that they would have been to the top right of the map or hovering around Astrea's base, but that was a very good use of it. But equally good use of the Adepts. Astrea just sneaks on in, gets 6, maybe 7 probes where the Adept dies. And his Stalkers, well, they're going to be punished. He's going to lose some of them. Oh my gosh, he's doing the rake thing. Oh, he recalls instead. Okay. Yeah, I guess it results kind of in the same amount of Stalkers lost, right? Because he'd always lose Stalkers on every blink. So, okay, I get it.
Yeah. That was pretty nice from Astrea. He was quick on the trigger, quick to get out of there. Does take down this Oracle though, and that's a pretty big deal. And now they're even on army supplies, and this is a tough situation here for Trigger. His worker count is way behind.
Yeah, at some point, Astrea maybe just triple chrono boosted or something, because it was really 30 seconds ago. Didn't you say 4, 5?
Yeah, it was not a lot.
And then suddenly it's like, well, it's actually 18. So get freaking wrecked. Now, the 71 worker is actually fully, it gets oversaturated. Yeah, it does. Not by too much, though, once you take your gases, which now Astrea is doing. So he does just have a far better economy. Trigger cutting probes at some point or another. I mean, he is, again, cutting probes, cutting gas. He wants to go for the attack. And that just might be the best thing to do, especially if he finds an Immortal out. That was still a good grab, even though Trigger lost a couple of Stalkers himself. It's a decent start to the fight. Maybe overextending at this point, though, especially with that shield battery. He does pull back. I guess that could be considered a bait on the shield battery, as Trigger is only now setting up his Warp Prism. But this is chaotic, with Astrea's Adepts once again getting into the third. Excellent stage trap in the main by Trigger, but still, the Adepts are a big deal because Trigger needs to take them seriously. He was basically already all-inning, and he needed to hit that timing. But he wasn't prepared to all-in so much as to just let the Adepts kill all of his probes, right? But he just missed the timing 100%. It was debatable if he actually had something there anyways. But now, I still think it's not the case. Unless Astrea tries to hold on to his fourth, and then maybe Trigger still has a moment.
Yeah, there is a lot of charge loss here. +2 weapons not yet done. Battery overcharge still on cooldown for another 10-15 seconds. And we are going to see... Oh, no! He blinks to the wrong side right there. And that's going to kind of leave his blink on cooldown. And his charge loss not really fighting effectively here.
Oh no, there's no observer. Oh, okay, well, I would love to hype this up, but I can't, because DTs are just going to run like anyways, and it looks like Astrea was going to hold regardless of the DTs. Maybe a bit closer for sure, but yeah, that's it for Trigger.
Ooh, nice out pickup on the Immortal. Good micro. But yeah, this is a situation you do not want to be in. The 2 Zealots did get into the third base there, picked off 15 probes. This is still an Astrea up a full base, building 4 probes at a time now, up 13 probes for the moment.
Yep.
with Blink on the way for DTs and plus 2 weapons about to complete. This every metric he's ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, Astrea's, I mean, he's won. He's won.
Yeah.
Total Debbie Downer when it comes to the, latter half of DreamHack. But Astrea did win. Absolutely a good idea from Trigger, and if he hadn't been distracted by the Adepts, I really do think that there was more to do. But the Adepts bought some extra crucial seconds to kind of put him into a maybe even weirder army positioning. And even though we still have a little bit of action, it's really not coming to anything important. Maybe it would have if Trigger just gets his Nexus and runs away, but he's also taking damage to the GTs.
Yeah, and honestly, those DTs could have just killed the Nexus, and that would have been hunky-dory. As it is, they're still going to be wailing away at this wall at the front. There's way more Stalkers now for, 6 more Stalkers, 7 more Stalkers for Astrea, and he has that upgrade lead. A couple of charge lots are going to create some problems, but oh my god, the Probe Massacre in the natural.
GG. Actually a very fun game though, for real. There's so much action happening all of the time that even though Astrea had already gotten too substantial of a lead, there was always a little bit of a question. Trigger, he still had at one point, I think, a 15 army supply lead when he was coming back to finally do his attack. So there was that promise there. But his shield battery overcharge does cover about 20 even more supply, so nah. But then you have the Oracle stasis trap in the main base, so that's a lot less mining than Astrea would be used to having while he's trying to warp in. Suddenly it's 2 less Stalkers, maybe a shield battery overcharge gets sniped or something, which was what Trigger was trying to go for with that Blink. There is still some wiggle room, even when it was one of those situations where as long as Astrea didn't mess up, he would win.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the theme of what I've been talking about today, is controlling your own destiny, like controlling your own fate, which, yes, it is a very bit of an oxymoron statement, but the concept is very simple. Like, if you don't make any mistakes, if you win out from there, there's nothing really your opponent can do. You are the one who gets to control that, and obviously I've been referring to the macro sense of the whole group stages. If you get more points than your opponent, you're the one who gets to win. But in the game itself, if you don't make any major mistakes, that's the same concept, just on a smaller scale. Yeah. And that's exactly what we saw from Astrea there.
Yeah, of course, most important thing, I guess, in the beginning is that you get ahead and then you make bigger mistakes, which was the real problem in that last game. At some point, Astrea dedicated to a large amount of probes, and Trigger didn't do the same thing. And while that does usually leave an opening, you put a lot into economy, you must not have a lot of army, that never really was so open. We can talk more about that. Oh, and the decisions made in this game after this intro. Going for a fast expand here on Glittering Ashes. It is Trigger.
And his opponent, spawning down in the bottom left, representing Alpha X, it is Astrea. Okay, I am excited about this. So you talked about tendencies. Trigger doesn't normally play like he did in game number 1 of that of Blackburn. It's not really a common occurrence for him to do that. So this specifically is something he has done a fair bit. He hasn't been doing it recently for the last 2 weeks to a month, but he got a lot of experience with it, and he knows how to make it work, and he knows how to pull the strings with it. So I really like this decision. I don't know how familiar are you with the nuances of both sides of this?
You mean the expand versus the 2-gate?
Yeah.
Pretty familiar. It happens a lot when you cast max packs.
It really does. Yeah. First of all, what do you think about Astrea's decision to hide the probe? Because Trigger was looking around for it. I think that was a really cool move.
It was. I was going to note it as well. The first thing he did was put it on the high ground so that the more direct scouting path would not have seen his probe. So that was really cool. So he was able to scout without telling his opponent, I have a scouting probe. And then he was able to actually literally scout the forward wall without saying, I scouted that forward wall. So to a Trigger, it's very possible he just doesn't believe that he's been scouted, that Astrea is playing a relatively greedy PvP. Obviously not as greedy as what Trigger is doing. They're not scouting, but actually I think they're pretty good about counting probes, to be honest. So still suspicion that the probe is missing, but then to hide it to actually proxy a robo, well, that just makes a ton of sense. That's just what your option is when you go to gateways and they don't. Trying to match them, catch up to them when you've invested into that, it doesn't really work. So you do have to do a one base all-in. Pretty much you have to. And now Trigger just needs to figure out what exactly the all-in is. Is it a Blink Stalker attack that doesn't have a lot of oomph right now, but has oomph later? Or is it a Robo attack, which has all the oomph very much in the beginning of its life? Get that Immortal out, try and bust the opponent.
I would actually argue that you can play out of it, but you need to do some funky stuff, like for example, cutting your first 2 units or cutting your 3rd and 4th unit, or you have to make adjustments. You can't just play a 2-gate style and then expand much later, or you are going to be way too behind. And we've seen that time and time again with those Max Packs games. But Trigger, this is part of his response. As he does this, he will get a Robo and he will get a very quick Immortal. This is a good situation, I think, for Trigger. I think I'm not right this moment, because this is a very, very scary moment for him. Oh, especially if he doesn't pull back just quickly. Oof. But in theory, this could be good for him.
In theory, absolutely. And in theory, the 1-gate expand is always defendable. It's something that, Max Packs really is the one trying to prove that on a wide scale. And any map as well, he does it. But a lot of other Protosses, they first of all tried to copy him, and then they would fail. And that's just something we've heard admitted by Drogo, for instance. He's like, yeah, should I do the same thing? And that just failed. I don't understand it. But then there's also just the idea that, I guess, it's always punishable. It's always on the knife's edge, right? And this pylon on the main is one of those really cool things that most other Protosses wouldn't do and his Trigger wouldn't have to account for. That he literally had to account for, but in the same sense, he couldn't. You only have so many units when you open up like this. So I really like that pylon on the main, the Adepts coming in, and then I love the quick transition into Disruptors. You're not going to bust someone who's on the exact same type of army composition, but they're defensively minded. But if you put Disruptors into the mix, then you're just actually taking advantage of them being defensive, because they're going to be all holed up in their own SimCity.
Yeah, that's a really great point. You allowed yourself to bypass all the static defenses. That shield battery in the main mineral line, though, saving Trigger's bacon a fair bit. And now he's going to get himself, a little bit of opportunity to rebuild probes. He did lose 7 to those 2 warped in Adepts, but that didn't put him into a position where he was unplayable. I'm actually not feeling too bad about Trigger's position at the moment. However, it is going to get really difficult once those Disruptors hit the field. He
has to be mindful of that, too. That is pretty much just 2 options from Astrea's position. Well, technically you can try and macro out of it, so there is 3, but, all in, just really go for it, or go into Disruptors. And then maybe, sure, you can account for their lack of aggression and wonder if they're expanding. So point is, Trigger needs to figure out its Disruptors. This fight, it is important with how it goes. If it goes really one-sided for Trigger, then good for him, right? But if it ends up being a distraction that he's thinking, yeah, hell yeah, I'm winning, Trigger, way to go, myself, then he might not be thinking about the true follow-up, which is Disruptors. And if he finds himself just not paying attention because he thinks he's already won, that's how it's going to win. And we've seen this a lot, actually. Zest, I feel like, would always pull this win out of his hat. Oh, it's so sick, he came for both! But very fast reaction from Trigger. Well done.
Yeah. I just wanted to highlight, the War Prism was the perfect decision from Trigger, because if he doesn't have that, he probably gets all 3 of those Immortals hit by that. Very nice reaction time from Trigger right there. Ooh, these Immortals are getting chomped very, very low. Actually, him taking this fight was a pretty weird and rough decision. Disruptors are going to come on in. They don't get too much done, but they get the static defense very well. They knock out one of the shield batteries. Yeah, this is still so scary right now for Trigger.
Yeah, there's actually not a lot. There's not a lot shooting up here, so I actually didn't mind it initially for Astrea to warp in that offensively, but then 2 more Stalkers did come in, so that was a bit scary. The War Prism does take some hull damage, but yeah, they both have lost an Immortal at this point, but the Disruptor, it just went down, and it didn't get those Immortals. It almost did, but not quite. But the overall army supply is just favoring Astrea. Disruptor's great, more army supply, even better. Disruptor gets a couple of Adepts. That's not usually the main target, but the Shield Guard Overcharge is used. It won't be available again for a little bit. This is still on a knife's edge.
I'm starting to really like Trigger's position, though. The Immortal Warp Prism Micro has to be perfect. Oh, he keeps it alive, but he does lose it.
They both.
Okay, yeah, now I think I really like Trigger's position. He still has two Immortals. He's killed most of the Disruptors. Actually, what's the HP on those? One of the Immortals very low for Astrea. Two of the Immortals relatively low for Trigger. This is such a weird but like cool game for me.
It's a really weird game. Again, abusing the fact that there is just not going to be Blink in this game, going for the Warp Prism harassment. There's really nothing that Trigger can do to stop this from happening. All they can do is mitigate it, and then maybe eventually try and punish it, you know, if the Immortals are here, what's the rest of your army look like? So we actually did have exactly that, the Ditto, right? Like, there's so little anti-air that Trigger uses his Warp Prism on top of Astrea's literal army to take down one of the Disruptors, I believe. He's looking for a second one. He's not going to find it quite yet, but it seems inevitable. It's just so much easier for the Warp Prism and the Immortal to take things down than it is the Adepts. The Adept shoots so freaking slow.
Yeah, and they do not do a lot of damage to Immortals. Now, Trigger gets his own Immortals back in position. He lost 9 probes, though, which is actually really, really problematic for him. However, we do have to mention that Astrea is going to be mining out of his own main base soon. So even though he's up in workers, he's actually not going to be out mining his opponent for very long at all.
That's a good point. Trigger almost getting trapped in his own SimCity there. That's where the Disruptors, again, look really good, but not quite. Kind of low-key almost, because there's been so much Warp Prism micro. The Adept number has grown crazy. So Astrea, he is hoping to simply overwhelm at this point. One Disruptor shot absolutely could change the course of this game, but it really is more about the Adepts. There you have it. The Disruptor shot doesn't even go off, and the Adepts, they decide to just go into that main base. The probes are pulled to the right side, but look how many probes it is. Like, congratulations, 5 probes. You apparently are going to be babied, but almost uselessly. Like, okay, just let him go, I guess. But the natural, that's obviously a much bigger deal.
Okay, well, now it's over.
Yeah.
He needed to be in position to protect those probes at the natural, but now he's on 4 probes. He's on 4 probes after he just rebuilt 2 of them. This is so bad. Funnily enough, he does have just enough of a bank to kickstart his economy back up to normal-ish.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This has become such a gross position now for Trigger. Oh,
yeah,
no.
Oh, God.
Wait, what? He missed the first shot, but he still gets 3 probes.
Yeah, that was a bit of a gaffe from Astrea, but that was so painful. Obviously, Trigger, you know, hindsight, should have pulled those probes in the natural a bit faster, and then had his army just stay in the natural too. Because like I was saying, the main base almost, it seemed inevitable that those probes were gone, but the natural still had so many more that with 2 Nexus alive, it would have been doable if it was like 12 to 20 probes. But obviously 2 to 18 is a much more difficult position. Trigger's trying to get some of his own probe damage in here, but the Stargate is a really good idea from Astrea. That is going to solidify his defense against the Warp Prism, as well as provide more harassment in the future if it was necessary. I don't believe it is. This is game over.
You know what? I was actually starting to believe if that Disruptor shot didn't hit, even with everything. Because, like you said before, there was nothing that really shot up against the Immortal. Yeah, there it is. GG gets called.